3 veterinarians, 2 neurologists. The golden retriever's name was Fern, and he had been with the Jonathan family for 3 years before Rebecca stopped dismissing what he was doing. She was a librarian. She thought this mattered. It would turn out that her professional knowledge was exactly what delayed her understanding. Jonathan and Rebecca had Henry, who was 11 months and had recently learned to point at things as a method of requesting them. She pointed at Fern constantly. He bore this with the patience of an animal who had already decided that Henry was the most important thing in the building. The behavior started on a Monday. Nothing obvious. Fern began positioning himself between Henry and a specific area of the house. Not anxiously, simply with the calm, particular resolve of an animal executing a task that required no audience approval. He would stand there. He would wait. If Henry moved toward the area, he moved with her. If she reached for something, Rebecca moved him the first time. He returned before she'd crossed the room. She moved him the second time with greater deliberateness. He returned in under 4 minutes. She'd begun consulting her librarian colleagues about canine resource guarding. The wrong question, arriving from the wrong framework, producing entirely wrong conclusions. Her expertise was the problem. She had a category for what she was observing. The category was incorrect. Jonathan was less certain, which meant he was watching what was actually happening instead of watching for confirmation of what he already thought was happening. He mentioned it to his brother. His brother said he'd heard of something like this. Jonathan said he'd heard of it too. Neither of them said the thing out loud because it sounded like the kind of thing you didn't say until you had proof. On the 7th night, Rebecca sat on the kitchen floor at 11 p.m., with her back against the refrigerator, watching Fern maintain his position near the area he'd been attending to all week. She had a cup of coffee she wasn't drinking. She had her phone with the browser open to a veterinary behavior website she wasn't reading. She was watching the dog. He turned and looked at her once. Then he turned back. 2 days later, the thing happened. The details are specific, which is why they matter. Fern began a behavior he had never exhibited in 3 years. He moved from his position and pressed himself against Jonathan's legs repeatedly, in the direction of the phone that was sitting on the counter. Jonathan reached for it. Jonathan called the number he needed to call. What the gas utility emergency tech found was gas leak through kitchen wall. The gas utility emergency tech explained the science afterward. Dogs can detect mercaptan concentrations at 14 times below human detection. The window between detectable and symptomatic, in this specific case, was the window in which Fern had been standing in exactly that spot, in exactly that position, for exactly that many days. The accumulation in that room was already at explosive concentration levels, the gas utility emergency tech said. Not because she needed to, she would remember it without writing, but because she needed to do something with her hands in that moment. She had a category now. The category was, I had a professional framework that was wrong. The dog had no professional framework. This is not an abstract thing. The family went through the math together later. The number of days, the progression of what had been building, the window they'd had. Fern had started attending to the situation before any instrument would have detected it, before any symptom would have been visible, before any human sense would have registered anything as wrong. He was working from a different data set. The family modified the house. They had the inspection. They followed the protocol. They thanked everyone they were supposed to thank. What they couldn't do was fully account for Fern's contribution in any of the official paperwork. There isn't a field for it. The gas utility emergency tech put early detection in the report. Early detection is accurate. It is also incomplete. Rebecca sits differently on the kitchen floor now, differently than she sat in the beginning of this story. Lower, with Fern beside her instead of across the room from her. She had 20 years of professional training. She had a dog who'd been paying attention to things she didn't have instruments to measure. She doesn't say she was wrong. She says she was working with incomplete data. Fern has no opinion on the distinction. Who is 11 months and has recently learned that pointing at the dog works somewhat better than pointing at most other things. He is patient with her about it. Has your dog ever done something that didn't make sense? Until suddenly it did. Tell us in the comments. Subscribe so the next story finds you before the noise does. The follow-up appointment confirmed what the dog had detected first. The notes in the file said, "Early intervention, excellent prognosis." The dog received no mention in the clinical record. The dog has never required a clinical record. He already has his own system of documentation, filed in behavior, maintained nightly,